7 projects going out of the planning board or preservation board, which represent the first significant investment developing interest in the city since I've been here.
I mean, I just think that to add to your comments, it would be great to have a quote from somebody saying, I have a great experience with Lake Worth, because I still can't find it out there. You know? I mean, I love your attitude and I love everything you're saying, but I still can't find a quote from somebody saying they had a wonderful experience.
As a 30-year resident,
What's that?
as a 30-year resident that totally rehab 2 houses in the process of the third one, life has been a lot smoother as of late. It's been a pleasure. I hit 1 or 2 bumps, but they were bumps. Paperwork is no longer left on somebody's desk for weeks, months on end.
So I think those kind of, that quote, your quote should be on the website.
Being applied and used. So it's a lot smoother. There's still a few more hurdles to work out, and hopefully the building department can start using technology and put everything in the computer. But it has been a pleasure in the last 12 months.
Well, that's great to hear, and I really think we should use that as a promotion for the town, because I think coming from the city is one thing, but coming from
And that's why we asked a unbiased private planning firm to do the studies for us on both cases. I didn't want it manipulated or influenced by staff. I didn't want it to be staff's project. You take our code, go off in a little room someplace, figure it out what it can actually be in real life. So I wanted to make sure that no one thought that I had influenced it, because if you don't know, my background is urban design and architecture, interior design and preservation, so I knew from a development standpoint what was needed in Lake Worth. And it's taken us a lot longer, I'll admit. When I came here, I committed to 2 years to try to turn things around. It's down to 3. But I didn't realize how unfortunately messed up the city is. I'm naive. And there are a lot of things that we're having to break down and rebuild. As the gentleman mentioned, electronic or having things readily online. When I got here, there wasn't a single application online. You couldn't get information online. We had phone numbers that went off to places that I don't know who answered them. Literally, we had to do a study to figure out and dial every number. Who is this? And they were phantom people. It was crazy. I mean, I about lost my mind. And we've also gone through a lot of staff changes. I don't know. I'm hoping it's good, but since my arrival, we only had 3 people left in my department who were here when I got here. Mark and Lewis are 2 examples of new people. There's been a lot of change, and it's going to take a little while to keep making changes because there is so much that's done poorly or incorrectly or in the wrong way that has to be sort of undone and fixed. And we'll do the best we can. But there is a great deal of outside interest for the first time, having read our code and understanding how simple it can be. And we have, like I mentioned before, we have 7 projects going for the planning board, I believe, next month, whereas there were months where there was nothing for the planning board. It includes a housing project, a commercial office relocation, a multifamily project, I forgot what else, but in total it's about $100 million of investment. And remember back a little while ago, your total tax base in Lake Worth is less than $1 billion, so $100 million is going to make a huge difference once it comes online, which will be in the next 1.5 to 2 years. Fence permits. I'm glad you brought that up. So Lewis and I, as the bane of our existence, one of the things that we have been inconsistent on, and I'll be the first to admit, is that depending on who you are, where you lived, and who you knew, you might get a fence permit fast, you might get a fence permit slow. So we had to come and make an equal playing field for everybody. One of the things that's required is an accurate survey, so that we know where your fence is going to go, and it's not on someone else's property, because we get a phone call probably almost every week. My neighbor's fence is on my property. Well, we go back to the record and look at the fact that there was not a survey required, and the application was made on a napkin. You can understand why the fence is not where it's supposed to be. The other part of the coordination problem was utilities was overly involved in reviewing the applications, when all it needed to be at the end of the day was a little note saying, make sure the meter is accessible, avoid this, avoid that. We had worked that out finally with utilities, because utilities did split. And then it became more complicated with utility review and electric utility review, and then a water utility review. So now we've condensed that down. There's actually a note placed on the system that Lewis has worked on. Lewis and I go back a long way, and he was the chief He's made a whole bunch of changes in the building permit review process in the past 8 or 9 months. I do have to admit that, like again said, that I couldn't get everything changed as fast as I would like. We went through a lot of staffing issues. At one point, 60% of my positions in my department were vacant. And trying to find good people, because I didn't want to just hire anybody. Because I think most of you have been treated poorly enough as it is, and I don't want you to go through another bad experience. So we want to make sure we got good people, and I think we've done a very good job with Mark and Lewis and the other staff that are there. What other questions might you have of any? If somebody had questions about code? No? You're all happy?
Explain the difference between building, construction, and code enforcement. A lot of people think it's the same.
Okay. Well, what may be confusing to many is that the department that we now call Community Sustainability actually used to be 3 departments. It's a building department, code compliance department, and planning and zoning preservation. They were all merged together, added some additional duties, GIS and housing sustainability, and incorporated the business license component. Code compliance deals with enforcing what codes we have on the books, the zoning code, not necessarily the building code, except for the fact that if you see somebody doing work without a permit, you should call code compliance. They'll turn it over to the building division, and they'll be giving them a notice of violation. The code compliance is really to ensure that everyone's actually treating each other nicely, living civilly, abiding by the rules that the city has decided are important to make sure that it's a harmonious, and safe, and clean place to live. The building division reviews applications under the Florida Building Code for making changes to buildings or adding new buildings, actually construction. So there are 2 separate things, but both of them do have a code. We have the fire prevention code, the building code for the building division, and then we have the City of Lake Worth's Code of Ordinances for code compliance, which is available on Unicode if you want to look at that lovely document. If you can't understand it, give us a call. We'll try to explain it. It's not organized in a very user-friendly fashion, so we've changed it and put various components of it on the website so that you can find it more easily.
Any news on the Gulfstream Hotel?
There's an announcement coming soon. That's all. That's what I can share.
It's one of those secret meetings we're not supposed to talk about.
It's supposed to. It should be announced in the next couple of weeks. Pardon? Well, they had us sign the confidentiality agreement. I can't say anything, but there are people that know about it who have heard that aren't under the cover of that agreement. There's lots of talk, and there will be an announcement coming forth in the next couple of weeks. Yes, sir.
Driving down Lake Worth Road, back to Publix, where are all those buildings in there? Is that Lake Worth or?
The ones that are on Lake Worth Road, just west of Publix, that is actually in the city of Lake Worth. That is a 216-unit market rate apartment complex. Lake Worth market rate. It's actually workforce housing, but our market rate is actually considered workforce rate when it's compared to the county.
And their apartment?
Yeah, they're rent. Yes, sir. That's the first major project that went through our process, and they were approved at 1 hearing, 1 time. And then in the city commission, they were approved there at the comp plan change because it's a residential plan development. So their whole process was approved in about 125 days.
Is it low income?
I will try to say this as difficultly as I can. The average income in Lake Worth is less than half of the county's average income. So low income by the county standards is actually middle income for Lake Worth. So the residents who live in that community can make up to, I believe, 60% of 120% of the median household income, which is almost $85,000. The median household income in Lake Worth is $36,000. What I faced that I did not know I would be facing is that there was a great deal of concern and consternation over how the people that were being brought in to live and buy houses under the NSP2 program because they were considered low income. But they too can make up to $85,000 per household. And in many cases, they were making significantly more than their neighbors who were complaining they were low income. So I'm like, I don't know how to help you because I've never faced the fact that you don't want people coming into the community who actually have more money than you do. But
What would they rent for this apartment?
I think the one bedrooms are going to start around 700, 800, and they have 3 bedrooms that go up to about 1,400 maybe. It's got a really nice clubhouse, a pool.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
That's one of those projects that
but we also hope that providing that supply of rental housing will also get people who are renting in really substandard housing to move to a nicer place, and then we can get those apartments rehabbed, because Mark and Lewis and I are confronted with about 1,200 active code cases in the city, which relates to people who overcrowding, buildings that are in bad shape, overgrown lots, abandoned cars, trash swaths, houses that are in foreclosure we can't find someone responsible for. But things have gotten better. We are complying more cases through our process than we used to be. We've actually, from a revenue standpoint, the business license revenue in the city has more than doubled since 2011. The code compliance collections has more than doubled. The use and occupancy program, which was revamped, it used to be called the certificate of use, has generated almost $250,000 this year. It is not inconceivable that our department in the next year or so will be self-sustaining, which is rare for any community. Yes, ma'am.
On the workforce apartments that we were just talking about, is there a stipulation as to how many people will be allowed to occupy
Yes.
this apartment?
We readopted in February of last year the minimum housing code, which stipulates how much room has to be in a bedroom for one person or two people. The most that probably can live in a 3-bedroom unit is 6. That project will be privately owned. There's no subsidy from the county, and there will be on-site management. And then we'll have to have an use and occupancy inspection, which we kind of go through and make sure there are no life safety issues and no overcrowding. The overcrowding issue is a really difficult one to enforce, and we have a major problem with that. And I know that I got blistered by probably some of you when I first got here, that why can't you do anything? That digging in the code and realized, oh, I have nothing that I can hold against them because we don't have a minimum housing code in Lake Worth. It was taken out of the code at some point, so put back in, which you now have to have electricity and running water and plumbing and heat to live in a house or live in a residence in Lake Worth. 2 years ago, we didn't have to have that, which a lot of you were really upset about. Yes, sir.
What's the vision or dream for Dixie Highway?
Pardon me?
Dixie Highway.
Yeah, that's fine.
What's the vision? What's the dream there?
The vision is looking at it from different nodes. What we wanted to do is segregate, in a way, the different sections of Dixie Highway, kind of how West Palm is done. As you can tell, West Palm's improvements are creeping down the road very fast, south, and we'll get to us. We want to try to encourage a neighborhood commercial office at 10th, 6th, in the downtown. There could be mixes of residential and retail in between, but Lake Worth will never, I don't believe, be able to support retail along the whole corridor because it's just too long, and there aren't enough residents nearby to support all that. So we're hoping to, through this study, as well as another one, as an example of that. I don't know if you may be familiar with the Urban Land Institute. They're a national nonprofit that looks at urban development. And they have chosen, the Florida chapter or region has chosen Lake Worth as a study area to help us look at how to encourage transit. They will be working with us to study the future station location of Lake of Concern, the FEC, and also that will influence, to some degree, Dixie Highway, because the West Palm Beach paid ULI to come in and study their community. Some of the drawbacks for Dixie Highway is that there's no parking on Dixie Highway. There is a project that's coming along that is pre-approved that I got looking at, and it was just probably designed based on city input, I think 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Anyway, the project could be pulled back 10 feet, creating on-street parking on Dixie Highway. And so we're encouraging through our code, pulling buildings back to at least make it pedestrian friendly, allow for a sidewalk, allow for some landscaping, allow for some street pedestrian activity that's nice. And then also, and we're going to work with FDOT on this, which is the Florida Department of Transportation, encouraging the curb to be pulled back on those projects so you could have on-street parallel parking. We will also be talking with them and possibly not narrowing Dixie Highway, but actually making it maybe 2 lanes, 1 lane north and south, 1 each, and then a turn lane to hopefully facilitate some parking on Dixie Highway and some landscape improvements. We have built a relationship to some degree with the staff at FDOT, and they're not completely opposed to doing some major changes to Dixie Highway as it moves along, because it really is a racetrack right now, and it's difficult for anyone to invest a whole lot there because it's just not a very hospitable environment.
I was hoping there'd be some grant money or something for the existing people who have businesses there to give it some charm. That's what we're really missing. I mean, there's no charm on Dixie Highway.
Well,
It's all-
she's not here, but I'll go ahead and speak for Jonah Leva, who is the CRA director. We have what's called a tax difference, or tax increment financing district, which is a CRA, which includes all of Dixie Highway. And so the amount of taxes the city gets has actually been capped out. So as properties improve in value of Dixie Highway, the CRA gets more money. They have a grant facade program, and it looks like in the next couple of years there'll be more money in their coffers, so they could actually provide facade grant improvements. They have a mural program. We're hoping to collaborate with them to apply for grants and use their money as a match to improve some landscaping. They did do the parking lot. That's about at 14th Street, I guess, thereabouts. And so their economic status is looking better. So they should be able to help out on Dixie Highway. Yes, Teresa?
Question for you about the building funds violations. That's going on the tax bill
Okay.
now?
We have code compliance has gotten really complicated in Lake Worth, but it's gotten complicated everywhere. We have 3 different mechanisms for code compliance. One is standard code compliance, which at the end of the day can turn into a lien, which runs with the property or we end up in foreclosure. We also have what's called nuisance abatement, which is triggered by PBSO. Either we have drug-related activity, prostitution, or gangs. And that's a separate process that can't be written in code, and that leads to your building can be closed down, your business has to be revoked, a bunch of things. But it has to be triggered by your PBSO and those 3 activities. But we also have the chronic nuisance program, which was adopted about 3 years ago. We massaged it some more, and what it allows the city to do is under 3 different types of scenarios. One is if the property in the city has repeating calls of service to PBSO for nuisance activities, which could include loitering, battery, a bunch of different things. If you have 3 calls of service within 30 days or 7 calls of service in 6 months, your property can be deemed a chronic nuisance. And it goes with a special magistrate and has to be a plan put together by the property owner. I'm going to do these things to make sure my problem property isn't a nuisance. If the property owner does not do that plan and do those investments, the city can do it for him, charge that person back, and if they don't pay the bill, that bill can be attached to the tax record. So eventually the city will get paid back. In tandem with that, we have 3 other services that we're still putting in place, and some of the first ones are going to come out next month, is that we can do lot clearings, board and security, which is securing your property, and demolitions under the same program through code compliance, not PBSO. And if the city incurs costs doing those 3 activities, those can be placed on the tax card as well. So at least the city will collect some money back, probably in a 2-year cycle.
You mentioned before how many empty properties there are abandoned. How are you going to be prioritizing the tear downs? And
There are 2 different mechanisms for demolition. One is unsafe structure that's a immediate threat to life safety, and we are focusing on those, and Louis is working on the documentation for that. We've got 7 in the process, which should be hopefully coming down in the next 60 to 90 days, and there's another 13 right behind it. And we may be identifying more as we go through the fiscal year. The other process is called standard demolition, and there we tell them that you've got a problem property, you can tear it down. They don't do it with this very arduous, long process, which can last up to 6 months, and at the end of the day, then you can't tear that property down. So there's two different ones. The city also has, which we are enforcing, if you have boarded and secured your property and have done nothing with it for a year, you now have to either tear it down or fix it up. And we've been sending out new notices saying your place has been boarded up for years, it's time to get off the pot and do something or tear it down. And we're hoping that some of those properties, which are owned by people that we all know, will take it upon themselves to do something with that property or tear it down, which will at least get the blight off the street. Did that answer your question, sir? Lots of questions, good. I think go back to somebody else. Yes, sir.
On these projects that you outlined here, is there anything in particular that you could go forward anytime in the near future? And are you soliciting developers for these projects?
We have given one presentation, we're giving another one, and I'm kind of going out on the road on this thing. We have nominated this whole project to be presented at the American Planning Association in Jacksonville in the fall. It was accepted. So I and the consultant, we presented that to all the planners in Florida about where we've come from, because I think people thought that Lake Worth was never going to get its act together, and we kind of now eclipsed many people in southern Florida by our process and how clear it is. I have some development background, so we are contacting them. I'm not actually necessarily pushing any one development, but we were actively involved in the West Evans project, but that project fell through, and I was sort of sorry about it, but at the end of the day, I'm not as unhappy as I would have been, because we provided, a base for that project, which is that smaller one, which we call Site 5. The developer called me, and I called them and said, why did the project fall through? Well, I didn't think I was going to be able to get 75 units there, which means 60 units per acre. The highest density the city has is 40, so they were going to be looking to try to build 50% more than that. And they wanted a 4-story building covering the entire block, which, if I were allowed that to happen, I might as well just go ahead and stand on a post and be shot at. So, in one way, our code worked, because the building that most people don't like can't happen. I said, you can do almost 40 units there on that property. I think it's 36. You can do 3 stories. And the price of the property is $500,000. Having done performance before, I said, if you have a $500,000 investment in a property, you do not need 75 units to make profit.
Right.
36 plus some office or professional office should be more than sufficient. So he went somewhere else. And though the investment didn't come, I think he speaks well that what I heard immediately in my head when I first got here was that we want development that's sensitive, appropriate, and sort of embraces the overall community. The other part about what we try to focus on is trying to see Lake Worth built out. It's inappropriate to allow one person to have a whole bunch of development on one property and then no one else to do anything. And so our goal is to see Lake Worth built out, like Dixie Highway looking really nice from one to the other, and all the vacant lots downtown have something on them eventually. You had a question, Jen? Sorry.
Well, again, the redevelopment, of course, we certainly need here in Lake Worth. One thing that I wondered is that maybe a couple of years ago, maybe it's been 3 years ago, we were granted that $22 or $23 million to redevelop some homes or buy some properties. Did that add any appreciable tax revenue to our city?
In a roundabout way. There were over 120 units created, either reconstructed, constructed new, renovated, and the Urban Arts Loft project is one of those. La Jolla, which is being built on 6th Avenue, another one. And that program has income. As those properties are sold, those people, there's income that comes in that can be reinvested in other projects. All of those projects happen in the CRA district. So we, the city, don't really benefit from a tax basis, but the CRA gets more money, and so we can make them do more things that the city otherwise has to pay for. We do get some spill-off. There have been some business tax increase revenues from businesses that have opened as home occupations. The products themselves have helped float and actually put the building division in the black. We've actually made money in the building division in the past 3 years. The commenters love that we've streamlined and really cut everywhere we possibly can cut to save money. So it has, in property values have increased. There are properties that are in better shape now because of the redevelopment of NSB2, which in a secondary or tertiary fashion do help the tax base of the city. Yes, ma'am.
Since we're on the topic of the CRA, when an area gets redeveloped, can it be removed from the CRA district, or does it have to stay in there for a certain period of time?
Let me see how we can answer that question relatively easy. The CRA will not last forever. It does have a sunset date. I don't recall when that is. It's about 10 or 12 years from now. It will just go away because it will have served its useful life. I think it could be established for 20 years. As long as the tax differential still exists to support whatever outstanding loans or debt or bonds that the CRA has floated, it is conceivable that an area could be taken out of the CRA. But you cannot leave the CRA area in a position where it's in default or in the red so that it can't meet its financial obligations. And that differential really hasn't grown enough yet to really pull the area out. And that's also the reason why the CRA area is so huge in Lake Worth. it covers about 25 to 30% of the city, which is very, very large for a city, but in order to generate enough differential of tax money so they can actually do something, the area is really big, which is sort of the devil in details. Your question.
First of all, I want to say your presentation is excellent.
Yeah.
You said we were the guinea pigs. You have nothing to worry about.
Okay.
It's very good. I appreciate your time and patience. I really mean what I say about that. It's very good. I have a question about, are there any protocols in place for the question I'm going to ask you? I live on North O Street. The building, which was a home, on Federal, which my property backs up to, was just sold.
Mm-hmm.
It's a commercial block between 10th and 11th. There's a boarding house on one side of that property. There's the Arthur R. Marshall Foundation on the corner there. So it is a commercial building zone. My concern is, I don't know who bought the property, what's going to be built there. Is there any way that I could find that out? And can I have any input, or will I ever be informed of what's going to be built there? I'm afraid of my privacy.
Right.
There's a couple of stories right back into my yard.
There's a number of avenues to go. Within a 3-month period, the new owner should be reflected in the property appraiser's office, which is down at 301 North Olive Avenue, or is available online. Sometimes the information gets uploaded quicker than that. You said the lots on Federal and what?
Between 10th and 11th on Federal.
Okay, Federal Highway, that
On the east side.
location is considered Federal Highway mixed use, which is it allows professional office like an attorney, an architect. It does allow multifamily, up to 20 units per acre. You can build to 3 stories if it's a mixed use project, which
It's a
means
small lot, which is.
and it may not be able to, and it might be small, so in that case, it may just be a simple office. It would not go to the planning board for approval unless it had a conditional land use or were over 7,500 square feet of building being built. But
Is there any height restriction, or?
it's 30 feet. You could go as high as 35 under the bonus program, but you couldn't really get there unless you had a mixed-use project, because that's the only way you can really get to 3 stories. So it's really capped at 2 and 30 feet, which is the same height that you have on a big lot in a residential neighborhood. As single-family residential, you can go to 2 stories at 30 feet on a fairly substantially sized lot. So it's the same height as that. There will be required buffers, though. Our zoning code does require at least a 5-foot, if not greater, landscape buffer between a commercial use and the residential one. And there is a
Meaning they have to
maximum.
put tall trees to. So
There's a minimum size tree, and you can get additional points on the landscape code if the tree is bigger than just a standard sort of small 12-foot. I think it has to be 4-inch caliber, 6 feet of breast height about this high. It has to be 4-inch caliber, which is not that big. Depending on the species, which unfortunately Lake Worth has specified a lot of species that grow really, really, really slow,
Right.
or they would space too close together so they don't grow very well.